Hey, recording in progress. All right. React Denver, September 2025. Um, I don't do long intros just because I don't care. We have John tonight talking about AppScript, which I'm actually kind of interested about. See what Google has come up with outside of their acquisition Firebase. Um, so I'm going to let you kick it off. You are sharing your screen. Yeah.
I'm sharing my screen.
Yep.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Like the screen says here, I'm going to give an introduction to AppScript. I don't know how to get rid of this. There we go.
Yeah, I'm gonna kill
So,
this.
give an introduction to AppScript. So it's something that I think is pretty cool, and it's really useful for us as React developers. So quickly about myself, I couldn't actually find the picture of just me. So I've got one of me and my daughter. The first thing is that, I'm a family man. I do a lot of family activities and adventuring. I'm a sports enthusiast. Essentially, if you know me really well, you'll know that I've got a borderline unhealthy obsession with kite surfing that takes us as a family all over the place doing kite surfing. And I've reinvented myself in the last few years as a developer. I work for a company called Conduent. We're dealing with a lot of government services, and I specifically work on the React code base that we have there. Right, so today we're going to have a look at a couple of key points. We're going to see what is AppScript, use cases that we could actually use in a real world environment, things that I think are cool features with it, and we'll talk about why you should use it. And then we'll have a little bit of a demo of the actual topic as well. So AppScript, I actually pulled this largely from the internet. It's a free cloud-based platform that runs on Google's servers. It's designed to automate tasks, build custom applications on top of the Google Workspace ecosystem. So think Docs, Sheets, Calendar, Gmail. The Gmail is actually a really useful one. So it's essentially a serverless JavaScript-based technology backend that lives in the cloud without any hosting costs. So that's the bit that really captured me. It's free, and I think that's one of the biggest things for it. This makes a very powerful and cost-effective tool for prototyping or getting our React apps or any kind of app that we're working on up really fast. Because we're all React developers here, we obviously know that our React apps, they consume data. That data has to be served from somewhere. I might as well serve it for free, especially if it's something personal, small use case, internal tools. I wouldn't use this for enterprise solution. It's not actually at that level, but it's really powerful. Right, so use cases that some of these I've done personally. I've used it for automating tasks. I actually have a script that runs every Monday, and it checks what the date is. And if it ends up being the week that the third Thursday of the month lands in, it sends me and my neighbors a notification to move our cars for street sweeping. So that is a fantastically useful tool. And this, I'm quite hopeful, might be the first year that I don't get a parking ticket in Denver. So I'm still hopeful on that. It really excels at obviously connecting to Google services. This is a Google platform. Think of it like a back end. With all of the Google services, we've accessed them previously with APIs, but they're all built in this. It's just JavaScript with some objects scattered in for all of the different services. So you can call an object, which is a service, a mail app, and then you can hit a method on that service to actually perform a task that you want. And that, I think, is the real gem in this. That's the bit I enjoy about this. It's actually pretty good for creating API endpoints. I'll show you in a bit. It actually takes get and post, but from those coming in, you can figure everything out from there, and you can create a full CRUD app if you really wanted to. This bit I haven't done, but it's good for creating custom functions in Google Sheets and other products. So you can rather than custom functions doesn't really quite sell it enough. You can create your own menu bars across the top of Google Sheets. So you can have your own functions that you want to run as a button just randomly in the Google Sheets. You can create your own menu and write your own features for Sheets, for Docs, for Calendar, for any of the Google platform. I haven't played with that yet, but that seems like an extension task that'd be pretty cool to actually have a look at. And of course, one thing I'm going to show you today, building custom web applications. The speed of which you can do this is really quite phenomenal. I think last Wednesday, before heading out to the lake, I spent 2 hours and managed to create a CRUD app and protected the endpoint with an API key. I think that's pretty fantastic. And not only just create it, deployed it, and it was live. You could hit it, and I'll show you that in a bit. So cool features, triggers. So you have triggers, and you can actually use them. I'll show you a trigger actually in a minute. So I'll just go through these, and I'll show you some of these. So we have triggers, we have API integrations. So you know that's the objects for the Google services. You can split scripts into modules, so that feels a lot like Node when you're splitting in your different areas of work up, so you're maintaining a readability on the code. But what is cool is you don't have to import anything. If you can split many scripts as you want into an application, and those functions are just known throughout the application. There's no imports for it. But I thought that was kind of a cool feature because it avoids a lot of clutter at the top. It doesn't actually work with all the Node modules. It doesn't have full support for all Node modules. But generally, by using the Google platform, a lot of those modules you wouldn't need. My favorite part of this is zero cost. There's no cost at all to having Google services up and running. Yeah, so you can use it for building web apps, and it also has a built-in IDE. So if you open up that IDE and you start coding in there, it has autocomplete on there, and it really helps you code along. It's actually quite a nice IDE to use for saying it's just a free platform that's just built on AppScript. Right, so I'm just going to skip on to if I can get rid of. Can I? There we go. I'll stick it at the bottom. All right, so this is actually the AppScript platform. You can get to it just by typing scripts.google.com. And if you're signed into your Google account in your browser, you can just log into all of this. Now, I've got a couple of projects in here. This is one of the ones that I actually built. Or this is the one I built last Wednesday. So if you look in this, these are all my create, get all records, return one, get one record, update one, delete one. So these are all my CRUD functions that I built. I'll come back to these in a bit. I split it off for some utility functions that I don't need in my code base, but I use in all the different functions. And then this is where the APIs come in. So we get there's only really two endpoints. Again, I'll show you building one of these in a minute. They have a get and a post. And what you need to do is you need to access them with do get and do post in AppScript. And then you could add something onto the endpoint there, like I've added an action here. And those actions actually dictate the flow where it comes in after it's hit the get or the post endpoint. So one thing I wanted to do is actually show you making a quick application. And to stop you having to watch me fat finger my way through this whole thing, he says, and then Google has just gone. There we go. Stop you having to watch me fat finger my way through this actual building everything. What I decided to do was write this ahead of time, and I'll show you actually making a project. So just in here, we can click on new projects, and you'll see how it opens up in a minute. And it always starts with this code.js. You can name those whatever you want. And there's always the function, my function to start with. Again, you can name them whatever you want. So if I go in here and I just paste half of my code, it seems. Let's go back into here. So I've got an untitled project. and then a little bit of code here. I'm just going to comment it all out on the inside. Why does this is not on my laptop. It doesn't usually do that. Is that something to do with Zoom? There we go.
It's that magic track that loves treasures.
Okay, so I'll just comment some of this out. And I'll show you how we get things working. So one of the objects that you can actually use in this that I think is really cool is it has a built-in fetch object. So as you look at the screen now, you'll see that they have this URL fetch app. That's an object built into Google AppScript. And from there, it has methods all the way along it. If I actually just show you that being called, so if I was to do the fetch app and I do the dot, it has the fetch all and get requests. So, but you can build on those things in there. So that's how the IDE works with those objects. You can actually access things. And I found a small API that will retrieve interesting facts of dogs. So what we're going to do today is we're going to get together. We're going to hit this endpoint and we're going to save the result into a Google Sheet. And then I've got a small function at the end. I'm going to show you how we can deploy it as an endpoint. We'll hit it with Insomnia and we'll retrieve that data that we've saved in a Google Sheet, which is the basics of what Jeff alluded to in the Discord chat. We're going to be looking at making a database out of Google Sheets, which isn't a database, but it is a table. So we can, so it is a database. And we're definitely going to use it as a database. I'll show you in more depth, a more fleshed out version later. But for today, all I want to do in the demo is show you how we can save things to sheets and how we can retrieve them. So I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to create a new sheet. And I've got the sheet in there. I'll just give it a name. Demo. And in here, in the top, you actually have a key hidden from this D// through to the edit /edit. That is the key that we actually need to call our spreadsheets by ID. So I'll just copy that now and head back to our project. And just to save my time later, I'm just going to drop that in here so we can actually access the sheet. So just to show you how this works, I've set up the logger object. So we're actually going to run this and we're going to use the logger to just log it in a console that will pop up at the bottom. Just to show you the object coming in. Now, what will happen with the Google, because we're signed in with a Google account and it's a one authentication thing, it will give me a warning and you have to sign in and go to advanced and ignore because it's saying it doesn't recognize the developer that's making the app. But I recognize him, so I can authorize it. So if I just click on save now, because it's a new project, I've then got the ability to run. So if I just run this in the browser, and it should just log authorization required. So review permissions. I'll use that guy. And I'll go to advanced and go to the untitled project. Select all, continue. So there we go. Scholars have argued over the metaphysical interpretation of Dorothy's pooch, Toto, in The Wizard of Oz. One theory postulates that Toto represents Anubis, the dog-headed Egyptian god of death, because Toto constantly keeps Dorothy from safety returning home. So that's one of the interesting facts that we've got about dogs. That's actually one of the darker facts that I've seen on this website. But, as you know, it's not me that's pulling this in. Right, so now that we've got something coming through, we can actually use that. So as I said before, we're using all these different objects. So I've got a spreadsheet object, which, as we were talking, I actually put in the key for. So I'm now actually linked in. So it'll use this object to open the spreadsheet by ID, the spreadsheet I've just created. It's then going to use this spreadsheet object again that I've saved as a variable here to get the active sheet. Now, there's a few different methods of doing this. If you wanted multiple tables in a database, you could use multiple sheets. And you can name those sheets, and each of those sheets can have a different name that you can then call upon using the get sheet by name or get sheet by ID. As we only have one sheet, get active sheet will do it for us. And then there's one thing when you actually add in a row in a database, or sorry, in a sheet, it has to be an array that you're adding. There's different methods. This one's just easy to show for this purpose. You can actually identify cells as they go. But I find that just adding a row on each time is the easiest way to do it. So if I now call this on a run, and I'll wait for the execution to happen, I can go over to my sheet and I can see in column A, I'll make that bigger, a dog sensor smell is reduced by up to 40% when he's overheated and panting. And mine, actually. So we're actually logging things into the spreadsheet there. That's pretty cool. If you look at that, that's like 6 lines of code to hit an API, take that information and store it in a spreadsheet. I think that's quite a cool feature. But there's a better feature. One of the ones that I was telling you about before was the triggers and the time-based triggers. So they're all built into this code editor. So if I go down to one of the triggers now, and I'm going to create a trigger, and I want demo to run, so it already knows that. We'll go time driven, and we're going to do a minute's timer every minute. So what I'm going to do is we're going to talk through a couple of other features, and while this is saving, hopefully every minute that we're here, it will call the API and it will save something new to the sheet. Again, that's just built in, and because it's living on Google servers, they're taking whole responsibility of all of these time-based triggers. Now, one of the things that I use this for is because my niece and nephew were coming of age where they're getting email addresses. Every single morning we have a family joke. So I have a script that runs on here. It grabs a joke off the internet, passes it into an email, and sends it to my family. There's a lot of, I had to try a lot of flags actually before I allowed the kids to see any of those, because there's some pretty distasteful emails. But these are the things you work through as you're going. So if I go now into executions, I'll see if we've got any more executions running the time that we've been talking. It looks like we might have had another one. So if I go in here, so about 6 inches, the Chihuahua is the shortest breed. Right, so it's actually on the time-based trigger now, it is writing more and more stuff to this Google Sheet, and it will keep going. So we've got currently, let me go back to the editor. We've actually currently got a fetch call, and we're pulling in data, and then we're saving it to a spreadsheet. But one thing that I think is a real killer feature of this is how quickly you can deploy things, and you actually have endpoints that you can hit and you can access. So I have a function down here that I was using to get everything from a spreadsheet. So I'll just undo that. But I just want one of my helper functions. I'll show you this one in a bit. One thing you have to do is write a quick return statement to make sure that it's returning JSON. Otherwise, it throws out all sorts of rubbish at you. So I'll go back into here. I'm going to create a new sheet, script, call it helper. Drop the function in there. So drop the helper function. I'm actually already calling it in here, am I? No, I'm not. I thought it was going to be. So this is actually getting all the data from what we need. So I can just log that now. What I'll do is I'll just comment this because it will not like it otherwise for a minute. I'll run that again. So now you see it's actually pulling multiple rows of comments that we've put in the spreadsheet, which should link into this one. I'm also, just before it throws an error, I'm just going to go and cancel this trigger because it's about to throw an error when there's nothing there for it. So back in here, we've got the new function, get demo, and that pulls the information for us. Now, one thing that we can do is we can change that again, and I can put in here a return, and I can use my JSON response objects, and then I can put the data in here. And what that should do is make everything that we've already put into JSON ready to be returned. Now, if I want to make this an endpoint, one thing I've got to do is change this to the default do get. So in there, that should be ready to turn into an endpoint now. So it's actually hidden. There we go. So if I go to this big deploy button up here, I can deploy, make a new deployment. I can select a web app and I can do demo. And I want to make that so anyone can see it. If I make that only I can see it, I won't be able to hit it with Insomnia or Postman or any other service that I'm not signed in as John Dawson at Google with. So that's actually one of the key things. Another thing I find a little annoying with this is that anytime I make a change, I have to redeploy the app. It doesn't just automatically update. So if you have a couple of typos that you haven't picked up, which I get a lot, I end up with multiple deployments until it's right. The good news is it only takes a matter of seconds to deploy something. So as I go into here and click on deploy, we'll watch the magic Google circle go around and it should produce an endpoint for us to hit. So here it just tells you which version we're on, and I can copy the endpoint that I want to go to. And then if I go onto Insomnia, and I'm just going to make a new one here. So new HTTP request. I'll copy this in. And that should be enough to send and receive everything. So we've got everything that's now in our spreadsheet available as an endpoint. So we're actually now hitting that through a GET request and getting that information. Now, I didn't go as far as to make a small React app to consume this because everyone here works on React. So I figured that was like teaching you all to suck eggs. So I just took it to this point. But there's just one more thing that I want to show you. We'll see if I can get this. Well, I know I can get it to work. So we've got our new deployment in there. But one thing that is odd is this is an open API endpoint now. There's no security on it. People can just hit that endpoint and send anything they want into my app. Now, there isn't actually a built-in security system in here. But one thing you can do is you can go into the settings and you can store script specific information. So I could go into there and actually store an API key that I've generated or some kind of secret phrase that I would then include in my headers when I send the request. And that would fully secure the application for one user. There's other different things you can do. I mean, there is authentication baked in this for all of the Google services because you have the single sign-on one password for all of Google because you're signed into your Google account. And these things can be hit from here. But what I've just gone and done is exposed an endpoint to my Google account, which will let people, well, they'll only let people see what's in that spreadsheet. But you can see how that could end up being a slippery slope into a much bigger issue there. So I did have a quick look into security. And one thing you can do is in script properties in here, I could call it API key, and I could put a value in here. I'll just put React. It's not a very strong API key, but I can save those script properties, and those script properties are now available within my app. So if I would have to redeploy this because I've made a change, but I could go in there now and redeploy this. One thing I could do is I could open this up. I could reinitiate my time-based trigger and it would keep adding so the information changes. And then anytime I hit it through the endpoint, it would hit my do get function and just retrieve anything. So it would actually keep growing and keep adding information. That's largely the concept that I've looked at so far, but this thing's got so much more potential. With all of the Google services, especially if you're looking at, I know I spoke to Lars previously, and he said he's picked up a few clients and small businesses who need just little applications running. Well, you write an AppScript that links into Google Calendars using an object where you can check availability, add an event, cancel an event, update an event. That's a booking service. Like with nearly no code and a built-in object, you're not getting extra API keys. Everything's already baked in. And there are big limitations to this as well, but overall, it's just all positive. And it's free, which is my favorite part of it. So I think it's as actually I spoke to Clay the other day, he said it's a really powerful engine for rapid development, and I think he's got a point. I mean, like I said, this is just toy coding at the minute. We just put in, facts about dogs into a spreadsheet, but it's not a big step to take this to be something more and something more usable. And I think using the sheets as a database, the advantage of that is it's totally free. You can store up to 5 million pieces of data on a spreadsheet. For most small businesses who would just want a CRM, you could build a small CRM for them. They're not going to see 5 million customers in a year. And yet you're keeping all the costs down for keeping it running. All of the servers and everything are maintained by Google. There's zero config deployment. So there's no configuration. You just launch it. I think it's a very underrated, very awesome system. Right, so that was our quick demo. Let me just quickly swap back to this one. So this, as I said, this is a lot more fleshed out. So if I start in I call this controller, just because that's where the endpoints are hitting in. And I grouped them into get requests and post requests. So if I just show you one of these, so let's have a look at so coming into here. So all of the post requests, I took an action. So on the end of the URL that you get given, which you can't really change, by the way, you can add queries to it, but you can't change it. So I couldn't make this like /create, right? It's the one endpoint that we use for everything. That's one limitation, especially if you're just hitting them through the URL. But essentially, I added a query parameter of action, and if that action comes through as create, it uses my create function. If it comes through as update, it uses my update function. So I'm just using it as a very dumb controller just to manipulate and find my way through to what I want it to do. In the get, it's a very similar thing, but there's only two actions. It was get all and get one. So the get all, that actually uses an ID coming in as well, which is just another query parameter. Moving on to the CRUD functions themselves, this is where it's actually doing a little bit more work. They're more specific, and they're getting called by the controller. And then the utility classes I've got in here. Yeah, this is what I actually use on the API key. So I got this one set up with an API key, and I wrote a function that checks if that API key matches. If it does, it allows it to pass. If it doesn't, it just returns, you're not authorized. It won't let you go any further. So this is actually deployed and up and running, and super, super basic, but it's kind of fun. So if I just go into Insomnia, that's all of these endpoints here. And these are, if I just pick one, let's create one. So if I go into the body now, I'm going to use a name of Lars. What's your favorite sport, Lars? Good man. Rugby. So I'm actually just going to create something now. I'm going to create Lars as a rugby player, and that should add to a Google Sheet that I've already set up. And it's going to come back success record created. And I can go into here. I'll come out of this sheet and I'll go into the sheet that I'm actually using in here. And I should be able to see Lars in there as rugby, same as me. And so from those endpoints, I actually tell me if this is like too much. You don't need to see all of these, but I could also now go to a get all and send, and we'll see what we've got coming through. And you see we've got IDs and everything. Previously, it was just coming through as a list. One of the things I did in my get functions is I mapped over that list and tied them to keys, so I can send everything through as an object, which is just easier to work with for us in React. So I've got all these in here. Just like I say, it was really basic, who you are and what sport you like. So if I want to say delete John Rugby, so I can send this through, and let's pick number 2. So I send that. And one thing that I did do as part of this, and I don't know, you might work this differently, but I implemented like a more of a soft delete. That way, the record's still there. It won't show again, but I can keep my IDs in order because I'm generating IDs, just adding one to the end, which was just a really straightforward way of doing it for me. If you want to implement a more complicated ID, you could get away with just deleting the document completely or writing over it with no, empty values. I actually opted for the soft delete. So if I go to the get all again, you should see that John's no longer there. So we've just got Richard, Krista, and Lars. So you have all of this functionality. And one of the ways I implemented the soft delete was just in this column here. So it just updates as deleted. And then I've got a filter on just working. Sorry, it flashed at me and disturbed me. Hey, I've just got a filter on there just to ignore all records that column is deleted. Right, so has anyone got any questions on this? Is there anything that I've missed out massively?
Would you consider this more of a prototyping tool rather than full production?
It's not full production. I think there's too many limitations on it. And the limitations is something I'm going to just come into now. For instance, with all of these objects on the free Google account, I think you're limited to 1,000 requests a minute or second. I can't remember which one it is. It was a big number that I'm not going to hit personally. You're limited to, I think, 100 emails to be sent out a day, and there's limitations for each of the objects that you're using. That does expand quite a lot if you just buy the Google Workspace, which I think is $6 a month. And actually another part of that is you can then tailor the ends of your email, so it's no longer at Gmail, it could be at John Dender. John Dender. That wasn't on purpose, but I'm going to take it. .com. So you can actually put your domain name on the end of those with the Google Workspace and make this a lot more usable. There are also a couple of concurrency issues with this. When we know JavaScript is single-threaded, but I think if you had a whole lot of users using it, there's a chance that they could overwrite each other just by volume. Again, for production, that could be a problem. In-house tools, small businesses, people who are not dealing with thousands of calls per second, it's going to be just fine. And we also are using this database hidden as a sheet. You also can't write fancy joins for tables and things. It doesn't support that. You could probably fudge that together in JavaScript on the server to actually pull the bits you want and piece it together, but you're not going to have the same usability as an SQL language. That sounds super negative. All in all, this doesn't cost anything. And you could have a pretty fancy CRM based on this and the booking sheet for a local business at zero cost. Costs you nothing to deploy, nothing to keep it, no maintenance, no configuration. It's just there and it's going to work for as long as Google's a company, which I would bet on being quite some time.
Google likes to build products.
Is that what you were going to say, Clay? Well, this has actually been going since about 2007. It started off as a side project. I only learned this the other night, by the way. But it started off as a side project for the guy that was coding the sheets. And he kind of had this as a way where you can, because you can use this and actually extend and create your own menu items in it to do whatever whatever you want and implement any functions you want. And then someone saw that and thought it had great potential, and they opened it up to all of the Google platform. So they actually use this as the main thing for adapting and changing their entire cloud platform. So I don't see this going away anytime soon.
I was gonna say, the company I work at, AppScript definitely is how managers actually are able to use Google Sheets. Because without that, there's a lot of limitations compared to, those of us who grew up with Excel or something like that.
Yeah.
And so, AppScript has a pretty deep embedding in the corporate environment that I've seen.
That's awesome, because one of the reasons I suggested this as a talk to Jeff is I've talked to quite a few developers, and none of them seem to have heard of this, and I hadn't heard of it until I spoke to another friend of mine who was doing it. It was actually a friend of mine who I recommended. He was doing some kind of security coded locks for a church, and they wanted a time-based check on a calendar to say, right, if there's an event, the door needs to be unlocked. When the event's finished, 15 minutes after, the door needs to lock. And he's saying, do you think you could make some kind of system to do this? I'm like, I can, but why don't you look at AppScript? Because you can set triggers for every minute. Is a lock open? Is there an event on the calendar? Is there an event on the calendar? Unlock the door. Has it finished? Lock the door. I'm like, you're not even exposing an endpoint for that. You're just constantly querying and asking things. And so yeah, this, I suppose it can be used in an enterprise because he is earning money for that. But in the terms that we would use it as an enterprise application, then yeah, I don't think it's quite up to that. Interestingly though, you probably could link this in with something like Firebase and have a proper managed database with it if you wanted to. Like I said, when we first started talking, Jeff, the idea of using the sheet as a database was like, for me, it was just, can I do it? And it turns out I can. So I thought that was kind of fun and pretty cool. All right, so back to here. So in summary, AppScript can increase the speed at which you can test out new ideas. It's completely free and very user-friendly. It's a powerful tool to bring React apps to life, to serve information or serve to APIs that we will consume. But it's not without its drawbacks, but it's free. So essentially, I just wanted to show you all that because I think it's cool. And if you want to connect after this, here's some information in mine. All right, I think that is it, Jeff, for me.
All right. Thank you, John. Any questions?
Yeah, any more questions?
Awesome. That concludes September. I actually just got a submission in the middle of that for another talk, so I'll be talking to that person here shortly. So that helps satisfy my October event, thankfully, once I get that sorted. Pizza, please eat it. My kids don't like Pizza Hut nearly as much as they do Domino's, so I really don't want pizza for lunch tomorrow. It would be great if y'all eat it. Anywho, we have the space until 8 o'clock. I don't anticipate staying that long, but you are free to hang out and verse. I won't kick you out until 8, but yeah. Anyway,